Hello there, Reason users, PoohBear here, and welcome to my channel. And today I'm just going to be going over this very simple player project. There's absolutely nothing in the sequencer whatsoever. As you can see, the cupboard's totally bare. It's actually going to be driven mainly by this chord sequencer, which in turn is going to drive some other devices, which in turn are going to come back and actually drive the chord sequencer itself by changing patterns. So it's got itself quite a nice little loop going on. The main purpose, I'd say, of this is really to try and show off the random tool and the note tool and how I've actually decided to utilize them, because I don't think I actually talked about the modes too much when I actually went over the note tool. I think I forgot about that. I'm actually also using the random tool in a way that I suspect the developer never thought about of actually using it. I like to do things slightly different, and the end result isn't like a terrible result. I don't think it's it's a grand musical result. It could be a start of something, but I'm actually just quite happy the way it's actually all come together. So very quickly, I'm going to go over the musical devices to start with, and then we obviously talk about the more sort of technical side. So yeah, I've got a Modo drum over here, which is obviously doing some of the drumming. I've also got the oomph down here, which is the pet shopping. I actually like that patch a lot. We've got a monotone down here, where I've made a little bass up. Over here, we obviously were using a processed piano, and a little bit further down the stack, he says, I've got myself a friction, and I'm using this a spire and a respire. In fact, that spire's the only one which is actually going to be playing that whole chord or part of the chord, because I'm actually am limiting the notes further up. And then further down, I've got another compulsion, some other things going on, and we're playing, there's a June 3 down here, and there's actually a little Avenger sitting at the bottom as well, just to double up some sounds. So as I said, the main heart of it is this chord sequencer, which is actually firing off CV signals all over the place. One of the signals which is coming out of it, I'm actually going up to this particular random tool stack. I know this is actually inside the same combinator, but because this is actually an instrument, it's obviously, there we go. And so this very first one is literally going to, every time a chord changes, it's going to go forward, and we're going to randomly change that. Obviously, as this goes forward, then this is going to decide to go forward, then it's going to have a blank, then it's going to go forward, it's going to have a blank. So where it's actually got blanks, that means that this one's not going to go forward. And then obviously where there's a step, this one's going to go forward. And this is the clock dividing bit, which comes down, and obviously I've got some slightly different patterns, so the clock divider works a bit differently to come down to these bottom ones. So these themselves are then randomly, not so much randomly, the signal that's coming out is going to be random. That's what this is. It's a 100% chance that it's going to give me a random signal. And don't forget, because we're obviously in Reason, it's between 0 and 1, so it's going to give me between a 0 and 1 volt, which means I can go off and change whatever I really want to on the outside world. Obviously, this is stable because it is obviously clock dividing, but you are getting a very odd kind of clock division which is going on. Usually clock divides, we like the clock by, we're divided by half or by a quarter or by whatever, but this is actually going all over the place, especially when you get things like this. So it's going to move that last one along a little bit quicker, and then that one's got blanks as well. So it's an interesting way of stacking them and getting different results out from them. As I say, on the back it's all quite straightforward stuff. So one, I am taking this pitch note out of here and I'm taking it there. On the other ones, I'm actually taking the output here. I could have obviously done the same thing and just taken it out of the pitch, but I think I had other ideas, and then like all projects of mine, they start off very small and I don't know where they're going to, and they just sort of grow out of control. But as I say, that one's controlling now. I've got this one coming in, so this is actually doing like the bass stuff, that's doing the compulsion stuff. These ones here are actually going off and actually doing the drum stuff as well, so that goes actually straight into a combinator on the drum stuff. But as I say, that's I'm going to say slightly different from maybe how they thought about using the random tool, is actually using it as a CV signal itself, rather than coming up and generating obviously random notes, which it should be. Now, one of the things you're going to see me using a lot is, especially with this filter adjust. In fact, I'm just going to zoom out a second, and I'm actually going to do an application zoom in. For the simple reason is it should be just slightly clearer. And then on top of this, I can actually zoom in even further, can't I? Hey, look at that. Wow. So I'm using, on a number of cases, they're called the filter adjust split. And on this particular one, we're not. So I need to come over. So bear with me. This is the one I've actually got it turned on. That other one does turn on and off, but I wanted to talk about this one. So the with this particular compulsion, the notes tend to be that little bit high because I actually take the chord as a whole and then I split it over my patterns. And so obviously some of my patterns do go high. I don't think I've got any high ones here. Oh yes, so these notes can be actually quite high. So when that happens, so as a whole, most of it's playing down here, so it's just dropping through. So we've got direct out, so that means it just drops through. And every now and then I'm going to hit a high note. That's no problem. I come into here and I'm actually hitting my octaves and I'm just taking it down an octave. So I'm trying to shave off them really, 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 really high notes, which is quite interesting because when we come down to the bass generator itself, let's see if I can move this up this way. I've got too many zooms on. Let me zoom out. This is actually doing the opposite. So because this is taking a root note in directly from the chord sequencer, and I've already taken it down an octave, most of the time it's playing in this range here, which is quite nice. And then every now and then it throws off some very, very low notes, which I don't like. And so in that case, I say, right, go into the octaves, and I actually move them an octave higher. So this one's actually moving them slightly higher. The other one's moving them slightly lower. And then obviously we have to turn them on and off what we want. Finally, yeah, the random tool, that's just a basic, hey, I'm randomizing the velocity, which is coming down. So that one's really, really straightforward. And that's like the bass. So over in the drum section, what we've got a few interesting things going on. I've decided to lock the kick. Now the kick, interestingly, if you look at this, we take the kick and we actually put it straight into this player down here. So I'm bypassing this stack. So that's just the kick coming straight down. And then obviously I'm using the note tool here to reject the very low notes. And I rejected a couple of them. I could have actually turned these down or done something else with them, but when I was playing around with it, as you understand, when you're playing around with these things, I just moved it up. I thought, yeah, I've cut out a lot of the snares and stuff going on, which I didn't like. So that kick is constant because I've locked to the position. So even though this is going to be going all over the place, picking up different patterns, I've actually locked the kick into place. I'm ignoring it in this particular stack, so it's being blocked. But I'm actually throwing the kick down here, so it means I've got a nice constant kick no matter what sort of pattern I'm taking. And I say that sort of gives it an anchor. So with this sort of project, you want an anchor where you've got wild things going on so you don't lose it. If that kick was going all over the place as well, it just doesn't sound right at all. And then I've got a probability on this stack as well. So even though I'm choosing different patterns, I'm actually choosing, well, I'm randomly deciding which notes are actually going to come through and actually play. And that's virtually the same down this one here. The big difference obviously is I haven't done the kick. In fact, I've turned the kick density right down, so we're not hearing the kick from here. But yeah, I've got a few other things going on, and yeah, I'm just changing the velocity. So that's a very, very straightforward one. But I don't have many of the mirrors turned up, whereas on the other one I think I had more of the mirrors sort of doing stuff as well at the top there, so we had a lot more going on with that particular one. So there we go, that's a kick, that's a bass which we've got going on. I'm just going to turn that off a second. And here's another one, what I'm doing, might show over on the other stack, but it happens on the other stack as well, is I'm using a probability of 0. A probability of 0 means it's going to block it. So if I have anything coming down here, probability of 0 is actually going to block it. So obviously I can actually use this. I can obviously have a bit of CV signal turning this on and off, and I can obviously block this stack coming down so the MIDI signals are actually broken coming through. As I said, over on this stack here, I actually do that a lot, and this is really where I've got my sort of my pianos and a couple of leads and a few other things going on. So the first thing I do in this stack, so from the note chord, right below the note chord, I've got myself a MIDI CV converter, so I'm bringing the MIDI straight over on top of this combinator, so it's coming straight down. First thing I do is I just say I'm just interested in the first 5 high notes, because on the chord generator, I think I remember rightly, I think I turned on the play at a very, very low octave, so I just wanted to cut that out. As I say, this is a compulsion, which has obviously got some, I'm using some of the auxiliary data, but it's mainly going to be playing some patterns, and obviously then this is all set up as using the probabilities all over the place on all of the, most of the lanes, or the higher lanes, should I say. And then that is going to say, hey, are we going to play the note or not going to play the note per note? Because obviously I've got things stacked. So this would be like a chord you're going to hear playing, and it's going to work out which notes of that chord it wants to play. And then obviously down here, it'll work out if it's going to play the notes or not, which is quite nice. Again, so this particular stack is actually going to be turning this on and off. So it's either going to be playing this or it's going to be blocking this. I'm just using a delta to take this particular piano stack and actually transpose it, so it's actually going to be playing an octave higher and lower as it's actually just playing the actual piano, so it really thickens the piano right up. We've got another compulsion which is very similar to the top compulsion, which is obviously driving the friction here. I will be turning on and off this particular compulsion, so the top one doesn't really get turned off with the piano. The piano itself gets turned off as a whole, but this one minute is sort of following the piano, next minute it's not. It's actually going off and doing some other things on its own. Respire, this spire is actually the only one which is going to be playing that chord as a whole, but it's very quiet in the background. Then I've got a random dual arpeggiator, which is taking that chord, totally randomise it and going through the respire. See, I knew I had a respire in here somewhere. Down here, same sort of thing we're going to be doing with this, but if you may notice, I've got a probability of 1%, so every now and then this kicks through. And I must admit, the only thing I've got to do with this, to tidy up a little bit, is really I should control the level. So I think when the piano's playing, every now and then this would just sneak through a few funny little notes, but I think I just need to take the level down, because it does cut through quite loud. And similar to this one here, I'm using the probability again, but because they're on separate probabilities, 1 minute you might get this coming through, next minute you might get that coming through. But don't forget, when I then flip and turn the piano off, these all get turned off, so these are playing as a whole. And again, I'm limiting the range on this, and I'm actually setting the octave up by an octave on this particular device here. And that's basically it, basically, he says. And just a few little things are going on. Effects, I'm not using much in the way of effects. That's actually on the bass. I've decided to put a bit of sweep on it, so like a little bit of phaser going on there, and obviously a little bit of saturation on the drums. So as a whole, that is what we've got, he says. What am I in? Application zoom? Yep, I am. There we go. So that is it as a whole. And what does it sound like? Terrible. So I'm just going to let it play out, and I'll whiz around the back and let you see some of the wiring and everything else what's going on. There's a few interesting things actually which are going on with this sort of stack, or this little part of it. As I said, this little part of it was actually deciding what we're actually doing, what chords we're going to play, what chord pattern. And I'm using this sequencer here just as a 0 and a 1, so I'm just using it purely as a switch. But obviously, in some cases, I want the 1 to go out to turn something on, or a 0 to turn something off. But I also want to flip that bit to go and do other things as well. Now, I call it a bit because it's a 0 and a 1. I know it's a 0 volt and a 1 volt, and we've got thousands of little volts between it. But I think of it as a bit, a 0 and a 1. And the best way to flip a bit inside of Reason is I use a janitor. There's a couple of ways you can actually do it, but quite straightforward. What I'm going to do is I do an offset by -1, and then you invert the signal. So if you take a signal, 1 volt, and you just invert it, that becomes -1, which is no good. So if I've got a signal of 1 volt, and I now want to make that a 0 volt, so what I can do is with the janitor, I can say -1, that comes 0, that's fine. We flip it, well, 0 flipped is 0, so that's no problem at all. If it happens to be a 0, and I want to make it 1, well, I take my 0, I -1 off it, so it becomes -1. Now I can invert it, and that -1 becomes a 1. So that's how we can quite easily flip a bit. And I do that, as I say, because I want to be turning some things on and some things off. A lot of this, it depends what you're actually controlling. If you're going back of the devices, this is what you want to use. In other cases, you can just shove it into a combinator, and you can obviously reverse the numbers inside the combinator between something like we're saying that's an off and that's an on, or you make that one an on and make that side an off. So you can just automatically flip it that way. You won't have to worry about flipping it down here. But when you're going into back of things and you're controlling things, that's when that sort of thing comes in handy.